Hello, this is Dr. Dave Maslach talking to you about reciprocity.com. The E is written with a 3. And in this particular video, I actually want to talk to you about intended strategies versus realized strategies. And what happens when the things that you actually intended to happen and intended to, or what you were expecting to happen, actually don't sort of end up with the way that you actually thought that they were going to happen. So this is part of my Nerd Out Wednesday series where I talk about things I just find interesting in science or things that we've known for a while and sort of navigating these particular issues in science, because I think this comes up at a fair bit, particularly those of you who are, looking at how sort of the world works or thinking about doing research on something like this. So, I think this is pretty relevant stuff in terms about thinking of what you intend to do and what actually does happen. So this is based on research that Henry Mintzberg did, and in this was back in like 1985. There's years ago, and we were thinking about at the time of how companies actually make a particular strategy or how they actually execute on a particular strategy. So strategies generally are some sort of forecast, and then as well as how we sort of execute on this particular forecast and how do you sort of carry out those particular actions. But there was a debate or sort of this story that he pointed out, that we actually think about strategies sort of incorrectly, that there is some sort of the way that we should be thinking about it is that there is an intended strategy, the thing that we actually intend for it to happen, these sort of a priori intentions or actions that we're actually going to pursue. So we expect something to happen in the future, and then we choose those things that we sort of expect to happen in the future. That's the sort of intention that we would like to do. And so we're pursuing the long-term, whether it's a long-term goal or action plans to actually execute on the thing that we intended. But then along the way, all sorts of stuff happens, right? So, the environment can change, or your plans might not have been as well laid out as you thought that they were going to be well laid out, or maybe you're working with several other people in a particular group, or whatever the thing you're working on, and those people just don't have the same sort of view as you do, and they're going and moving in different directions. So in that case, when all of that stuff happens, you actually have a different outcome, and these are the realized outcomes that you're going to get, or realized strategy that you're going to get at the end of it. It's going to be completely different from what you intended to happen. And it's only in a real small case of things that the intended strategy or the thing that you actually intended to happen actually does pan out, right? So it basically means that nothing changed in the environment. You didn't learn anything along the way. And then the people that you actually were working with were completely complacent, and they sort of did the exact same thing that you wanted to do. And the stuff that happens when you have this sort of unrealized outcomes or unrealized strategy that happens is kind of an emergent strategy that you get, right? So it's called an emergent strategy. And then there's all sorts of things that you thought you were going to do, right? You had this sort of intended strategy you wanted to do, and you realize that, nope, it's not going to happen in this environment. So then you have all these unrealized, or you sort of stop doing that particular strategy, right? So you stop doing that particular thing, and you never execute on that ever again, right? Because that makes sense. I mean, you're rational, and you're kind of learning and developing as both a person, or maybe you're a company and you're sort of moving along in that particular direction. So why is this important for science? Well, this is the way that actually science actually happens, right? So we have this idea that we have this particular hypothesis that we should pursue, and then we actually execute on this hypothesis, or we start investigating and we start digging down both into the literature, or we start looking at the context and collecting some data, and we realize, this is a lot more harder than I thought it was going to be. It's not necessarily as clear as I thought it was going to be, and we're going to have to adapt on the way. So there's some really important things that you should be doing when you're adapting along the way when this happens, right? So the first one is you should be recording and making note of all these sort of notes or these ideas that you're sort of pursuing. And you do that naturally if you're writing, and you develop sort of a theory at the beginning and you write that down, and then you sort of execute on that particular theory, and you should be sort of pursuing that way. but recording that and being as transparent as you possibly can, because there's something really important that happens. And I learned about this recently of reading the Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow. And really it's just a review of all the recent psychological literature that he was working on, as well as people that are doing sort of related research in the last, since up until 2011 when it came out. It's a really big, thick book, and interesting, but really, really dense. So anyways, the what he pointed out is there's psychological research that shows that, like, if you actually pursue something and you actually get one particular result, when you pursue that thing, that your mind automatically adapts to what the result was, and you kind of forget about what you're intending to happen in the past. And just even in the immediate past, you sort of forget about those particular intentions. So it's important to record and write those down, and maybe even do to register your experiments if you're doing sort of experimental stuff, or just writing it down and being transparent to show how your thought process changed throughout this learning process, right? So it's not assuming that you are going to, I'm not assuming that you're going to have the same sort of thought process all the way through the scientific process or the thing that you're working on, but you should be recording and thinking through these particular ways of how you're actually thinking. So whether it is maybe you write maybe it's a scientific blog or something like that, or maybe you are writing down in your own notes and then you sort of present this later on. This is how things actually happen with the scientific study that you have, and just being really transparent and open about the things that you've actually did, because you have to realize that your thought process changed. And the danger is if you present the outcome and the sort of knowledge that you've accumulated as like this is what actually happened, the danger is that other people are not going to see that sort of result along the way, and they can be very critical of your work, right? And that it actually adopted, and it's more it more reflects the context, and it doesn't necessarily is not generalizable in any sort of way, which is at the heart of really this sort of validity reliability debate that has been going on in science in the last few years. And you can look at some of my older videos where I talk about all that kind of stuff. So basically you want to record it, make sense of that, and maybe have some sort of diary of all the stuff that's happening. And when things do happen that are bad, and that happens in every single study, it's happened in every single study that I had, where somebody points out, oh, that's a fatal flaw, or oh, you shouldn't be doing that, or you shouldn't be doing that. Well, then you should be fairly entrepreneurial, and because you can't necessarily, that's a lot of work that you've put into that thing that you've been working on. It might have been 1, 2, 3 years. You should take that feedback and adapt to it, and sort of listen to what they're doing, or listen to what they're suggesting, and really sort of make sense of what they're doing, and sort of pursue that and adopt what you're currently doing and move in that particular direction, and say that this is maybe a more appropriate direction than what you initially thought, because you can't just keep banging forward and going on that one particular direction. If it's not going to work, if it doesn't make any sort of sense, right? So because you're learning, and it's a completely natural process. You should be learning throughout the process. So you should be taking note of that you're pursuing this particular direction, but then you went to a different direction because it makes a little bit more, it's more sensible, right? It just makes more sense because the reviewers helped you out to go in that particular direction. So what I'm getting at is the whole scientific process, just like strategy, is really both, and just like writing a paper or whatever project that you're working on, it's both a deliberate process that you're working on, and as well as an emergent process. So you have to work on both the sort of executing on something very deliberately and have a plan of attack, and don't really sort of stray too far from one particular direction to the next, but then sort of take advantage of those things, those opportunities that sort of come up, those emergent opportunities, take advantage of those, because some of those are really cool, and that really reflects sort of moments of learning that you can actually do, and that's the moments where you actually get really cool insights into things that happen in science. So that's all I wanted to talk about in this particular video. Give me a thumbs up if you appreciate it, and do subscribe to the YouTube channel. I do really appreciate it. All right, take care and have a wonderful day. Bye.